So now we move on to our next panel discussion, which is on redesigning workspaces. What's next for commercial real estate? The session will be moderated by Mr. Jaggi Marwa, Chief Executive Officer of Prestige Group Office Ventures, an industry veteran in real estate for over 2 decades. Mr. Jaggi is known to be an aggressive, out-of-the-box deal maker with proven experience in structuring complex acquisition and joint venture transactions. During his illustrious career, he has held leadership positions in organizations such as JLL India and WeWork. In the past, he has held many top management positions with RMZ Group, CB Richard Ellis in Dallas as their vice president. For the panel discussion, we have eminent panelists from our segment, Mr. Amit Ramani, founder and chief executive officer of Office Space Solutions. Mr. Ramani is the founder and CEO of Office, which is the largest network of co-working centers in India. He started Office with a vision of revolutionizing the office space delivery ecosystem in India through technology backed just in beyond backed just in time solutions. Prior to his current role, he was the COO of Nelson Global. He has worked with organizations such as HOK Consulting, Toyota Motor Sales, and the Environments Group. On the panel, we also have Mr. Karan Virvani, CEO WeWork India, a dynamic entrepreneur. As CEO of WeWork India, he has been at the heart of flexible workspace movement as both a pioneer and a leader for the industry. With Mr. Virvani at the helm, WeWork has experienced tremendous success and in 4 years witnessed a growth of over 5+ million square feet of land spread across 36 locations. We will be also joined by Mr. Kaiser Parvez, Chief Executive Officer of Nucleus Office Parks. Mr. Parvez is the CEO of Nucleus Office Parks and a 100% Blackstone portfolio company. He manages over 16 million square feet assets across India, where over 200 marquee blue chip companies run their offices. Kaiser has a proven management track record of driving growth across businesses over the past 2 decades. Mr. Vinod Rohira would be also a panelist on this very exclusive panel. He's the Managing Director and CEO of Commercial Real Estate and REITs at K. Raheja Group. Equipped with an MBA from Booth School of Business, Chicago, and a law degree from Mumbai University, Mr. Rohira began his career with the K. Raheja Corporation over 2 decades ago. During his tenure so far, Mr. Vinod has pioneered the concept of landmark business districts, premium residential and retail complexes, which have become the reference points in Indian real estate. With that introduction, I hand over the session to Mr. Marwa to take the panel discussion ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to everybody on a Friday afternoon. I just heard the last question hour and people were asking a Friday afternoon or Monday morning. Many of the people here, at least few of my friends there, especially from the developer side, will always say Monday morning because we are the guys who are in pure Hindi said Gada Mazdoors, and we really work on the brick and mortar industry. So for us, we're the guys, irrespective COVID, lockdown, whatever it is, we are the guys who keep the wheels of the nation moving. With that, I think I'll four great friends, one of whom have very closely worked during the start of WeWork. Karan and I have great affection for what we built together for some time, and then Karan is now taken it to the next level. Amit is, I think Amit, you're one person who's been very, very resilient and very, very, how do I put it across? You really put your neck around on, getting the things moving in times which were not so easy. And hats off to you for that. Vinod, of course, is a legend of sorts, and it's always a pleasure, Vinod, to every time I speak to him, I learn something that I had never learned in my life. So, thank you for that. And Kaiser, of course, is the new man on the big block. I know things are not easy when you're running a large portfolio, especially so. It's been a real thing. So I think thank you for on two great friends on the developer side, on the supply side, who control all the supply, and the two good friends who control a lot of demand. In fact, if you look at how the industry has shaped up, one of the reasons why co-working is now on the forefront, because I still remember when we were doing the plans for WeWork's entry to India, we were talking about TAMs of about 90 million people not getting enough white collar spaces to work from. And today, if you look at the entire barometer, from maybe a less than a 2% volume of transaction year on year that co-working used to absorb. Today, if you look at all the 4 IPCs reports, it has a separate co-working line. It never used to be like that. 5 years ago, people used to say banking, R&D, technology, and other sweatshops. But now co-working is almost come there, and it's a great time for many of the co-working guys. So I'll start with my first question to Karan. Karan, and I'll break this entire session to make it a little more interesting for all. I think the two biggest learnings, Karan, if you can, from the COVID world, and how it has changed your business and your approach to business at WeWork.
Sure. Thanks, Jaggi, and hello to everyone. Thank you guys for having me. For me, as someone operating this business, I think that two of the learnings that I would take away from it was one, the true importance of the relationship built both with your customer as well as with your landlord. Those were the times when we needed to leverage both of those relationships, and whatever we built over the last 4 years really came to light, and those relationships really came to light, during COVID. So I would say the importance of, relationships. And lastly, I think, with every business, COVID allowed you to really deep dive into your costs, while operating a business, to understand where you were holding too many fixed costs, where you could become a lot more agile and variable. But just also, cutting a lot of the fat. And in the last 2 years, we've learned a lot of that. And today, we're in a very strong position as we go back into growth mode to be able to capitalize on that. So for me, it's relationships and, watching the cost.
Super. Amit, if you would ask the same questions, learning from COVID, two clear areas that you thought really taught you a lot during this period.
So thanks, Jaggi, and glad to be here with all our friends here. Jaggi, I think the first lesson, and I think it came to bear, was only the paranoid survive, right? We had to completely revisit every single thing that we were doing, right? And why we were doing it. And I think that resulted in us pivoting, right? Pivoting in ways where the first thought then when COVID came was, what if nobody comes back to office? So if that happens, then clearly the business would be in jeopardy. So we kind of expanded the platform, right? So we went from just co-working and enterprise managed offices to our just-in-time solutions, launched Office at Home, which is a D2C platform, launched Office Care. So I think expanded the platform, which was very important. And that was because we all became paranoid, because I became paranoid, rest of the teammates became paranoid at the same time. And second, as Karan mentioned, I think I would just expand that, is that we took care of our stakeholders. And the stakeholders to us were customers, our landlords, and our employees, our teammates, and our investors. And because we were able to take care of all of them in different ways, we did not lose a single landlord. All of them supported us. We worked with our customers to work with them to figure out answers. And as a result, I think we lost almost 50% of our customers during the first two waves. We rebuilt all of that, and now we are 3 times the size. So I think it's clearly the ability to take care of all your stakeholders and be there with them and be transparent and honest. And I think obviously it comes down to, when you do the right thing, right things happen to you.
Super. Vinod, what would be your two, focus areas of learning from a developer's perspective, how things have changed for you as a developer?
When the same question is asked from so many people and you end up in the middle of it, you have to find new words to explain the same. But having said that, I think every challenge brings out an opportunity, and you got to be able to see it that way. And that can happen only if you have the right bench strength of relationships, whether it is your customers or whether it is the team you work with, or all of your partners, so to speak, who can drive you through this process. The second and the other important thing is, it really, this is like a tectonic plate shifting event, where the 18 months could have rattled, like Amit mentioned. It was trying to shake up the actual foundation of what you believed in and looked at and survived with. Whether you were able to get shaken off, or you stood your ground and you were firm on your ground and you came out stronger or not, I think that's been a phenomenal learning. And all it has done is really churned you, because you either break or you churn. Once you churn, you actually get out the best juice from what you can do. And that's really what has happened to our business. And we've been fortunate to come out on the other side with a completely new flavor and strength, with a far stronger embedded foundation, knowing that this tectonic plate has taken the shock. That's really where I see the two things.
Sure. Kaiser, for you, the two biggest learnings.
And when, just exactly as Vinod said, when you're the last one, you possibly have all the answers given, right?
I will ensure that the next question you answer first.
But having, but really having said that, the last 2 years, in a big way, the trajectory of real estate was really determined by the way COVID was panning out. And the good part is that as we go along, that correlation is weakening. For us, I think the biggest learning was that developer could not be a supplier of floors and desks anymore. Your buildings have to be far more than that, right? So the whole consciousness on how do you create value for the occupiers was some of the big realizations. Second one for me was obviously the flexibility, right? While you're sort of going about doing the business, right, how do you really make sure that you're flexible in your partnership, in your relationships, and so on. There was a massive emphasis on a partnership approach with the occupiers, right? And the third was how do you really, your agility to change. How fast are you changing with the changing expectation? There was a growing expectation from the assets. The technology, IoT, AI, so many things people are talking about. Are all of them are helping to deliver a better experience from the asset, and how as developer you're sort of adapting to that change. So that agility, flexibility, and the fact that you have to come out of your standard definition of a supplier of floors and desks to become more anchors of a corporate life, so to say, was one of the key learnings.
Super. It's nice that you ended the word with flexibility, because that's my next round to the co-working players. The course correction bit after pandemic and during the pandemic, how, especially with regard to the workspaces, how the workspaces demands are changing, how people are looking at newer new age buildings which are future proof, which are completely in a different environment than what we used to, because even as we speak today, people still haven't come back to offices in full force. So it's a great time for the co-working players along with the developers to actually change course correction. So my question to Karan, I know Karan, your business model has changed from where WeWork started originally to be a 60% offering to freelancers and entrepreneurs, and 40% to enterprise customers. But in the last 2 years, 3 years, you almost now went completely flipped on the other side. So how have you corrected, and what is the biggest learning, and how do you see the future of workspaces, at least at WeWork, from your perspective, Karan?
Yeah, so Jaggi, I don't think it was a conscious call of us shifting the business model towards enterprise, but what happened was that the adoption from the larger companies increased over the last, over the last 5 years for sure, and especially now as we come out of COVID. So what we, at WeWork at least are trying to do, and what our vision is for the next few years or the future, is to really be the one platform for all work requirements. And we believe that, businesses in the future will actually not require one way of working, but multiple ways of working. And with that, coming to light, what we were able to do over the last 2 years was, really build three growth verticals for us within the business. One, which is, completely customized long-term solution for large enterprises, which is, your managed office business. The other segment continues to be, the larger percentage of our business, which is sort of the space as a service business, which is your private offices and hot desks and things like that we sell within a WeWork space. And then the new segment that we're definitely seeing growing really fast is our digital products business, which is WeWork on demand, which allows someone to just, go on a portal and book a space at WeWork for as low as $500 a day. So what we're seeing is, the complete gambit of flexibility, changing, both flexibility and location flexibility being key drivers, and obviously giving employees the benefit of flexibility being the key drivers from employers. And so we want to cater to the entire gambit from the most flexible to the least flexible and most customized type of spaces that we're offering. So that's how we're seeing the change of the business. And these three are going to be our primary focus areas for the next few years. From a space change perspective, what I think is definitely happening, and we're seeing it from some of the largest occupiers, is what the office is going to be used for is definitely changing to a much more collaborative, social space, rather than more industrial fixed type of space that it used to be in the past. So it's going to be much more fluid. It's going to be spaces of collaboration. It's going to be a place where you build culture. It's going to be a place where you come to for work as your primary place of work, but still have the freedom or flexibility of working from home or other locations if that's something that you choose to do. But the office will continue to be the primary space of work, but it will be used more for collaborating rather than just housing people like it was in the past.
Thank you, Karan. Amit, how do you see, I still remember talking about 50 square feet per person or 60 square feet per person, but now it's not about the square footage more, but loaded amenities that people are asking for. So Amit, how do you look at
Sure.
workspace?
So, Jaggi, in some ways similar to Karan, but what we did was we constantly looked at customer behavior and how that was evolving, right? Because I think that was one area which was unpredictable because it was a once in a century event. So we didn't have any playbooks around it, right? Now what we are seeing, and obviously we are, moving in that direction as well, is that distributed work is here to stay. So people are going to continue to see a core location, as Karan said, for collaboration. They will have work near home options available. That could be through a partner, and then work from home for certain times could also be, part of the equation, right? So distributed work will adapt to basically distributed options for work, right? Because now clearly work and place are disengaged. Second big change which happened, Jaggi, was the enterprises became big adopters. And as a result, we were also doing similar to what Karan said, our co-working core business, which was basically, workplace as a service. And then we had a managed office solution, which became much larger through the network. And one thing which we firmly believe, and that's the reason we are now 100 plus locations, will go to 200 by December this year, is that the network will play a big role, right? For just-in-time usage, for work near home options, and work from home, but ability to go and use the amenities in a close by environment that could provide you collaboration options and so on.
Very, very interesting you say that. So just in time, which means you want to come to the local Kirana kind of a offering for office. Is that what your model is?
So Jaggi, our goal is just like when you think about fast food, you think McDonald's. When you will think about work, you will think about AWFIS.
Yeah, so very interesting analogy, Amit, talking about 10-minute delivery in at homes today. this might be the 10-minute walk to any space.
So in Bangalore, we have 22 locations, right? So I have a center today in that 10 million delivery option today.
And this is a good, food for thought for all you co-working players. You can take many of our smaller spaces across various buildings of ours. Super.
We're already doing some of that with you.
Good. Amit, thank you. Vinod, what would you look at from a perspective of where we are today and how the course correction post the pandemic, given the fact that you are leading one of the big REITs, of which if you take the overall square footage in India, about 750 million square feet of office space and 90 million square feet is REIT between the three REITs. And where do you see yourselves in terms of changing the way your offering has been in the product?
So, navigating through the pandemic, of course, the first 6-9 months, you were, like we said, in an airplane without landing gear in a fog. So you didn't know whether you land on the tarmac or where are you going to end up. At that point in time, the anxiety as well as the fears or the anxiousness allowed you to become creative, and you started thinking of models on how you can upgrade your assets and build a work environment that's going to be dramatically refreshing from what you have been traditionally building. So it was a great opportunity to build that learning curve as you build for your product. Having said that, it's not that we have to keep reminding ourselves that the same individual who's going to come back on the desk has not gone away to the Himalayas for a lovely experience. He's been trapped 18 months in a chamri of 10 by 10 bedroom where he's on the bed with a back problem by now, trying to take calls, some of them doing moonlighting, some working in 2-3 different jobs, some guys sharing the same bandwidth with somebody else's Netflix. So he's not been in a happy experience. The 80% of the volume of people are frustrated. Any change you bring to the workplace in a post-pandemic era is going to be very refreshing for them. So I don't think they're expecting the sun and the moon, but we want to provide the sun and the moon in the anxiousness from wanting everybody back. So I think if you fast forward 6 months to 12 months from today, where hopefully either the pandemic is side by side with us and we've learned to live with it as the new normal, just like another flu, or we are over it. At that point in time, when you're back to the basics of what you did, you may do few things differently. You may have far more hygienic human being, and the health and safety protocols might be far higher in terms of levels of experience that you would provide everywhere, not just in the office space. You'll pretty much be back on your desk, and then if the idea of building up the internal environment can be further supported by what we as developers are creating in the external environment, you will have a win-win of a product. You don't need to do a dramatic change to a building. It's not like saying that only 3 people can go in an elevator now. I'll be needing 50 elevators for a 50,000 square foot building. So the flow plate will be only elevators. So those things can't happen. You either live post the pandemic or learn to live with the pandemic. There's no third solution. You will upgrade to a certain degree. And I'm just giving you an example. There will be such changes that you will make to the backbone infrastructure, which is very healthy and good for the future of good assets. I think besides of that, it's really going to be how quickly you want to adapt back to the work.
So, in short, if there is one thing I can add from what you said is flight to quality. Assets will, with quality, will always command a premium, and more importantly, they'll continue to thrive.
And asset management, when I mean asset management, means you will have to handhold, because there'll be a lot of nervousness for the next 12-18 months when you move from a 10% physical occupancy to maybe a 60-70% occupancy.
Sure.
There'll be a lot of handholding needed, and you can either turn out to be a winner or a loser in that journey.
Super. Well said. Kaiser, your perspective.
Absolutely, very much like as Vinod said, and as Amit said, that sometimes what has really happened is that behaviors will outlive this crisis, and we have to live. Will there be a zero COVID environment? Perhaps not in the foreseeable future, right? So we'll have to live a negotiated life with COVID for at least some time. With that really being said, the physicality of office, has been there, will be there, and will continue to be there, and so on. But
that does call for a possibility where office itself has to reinvent itself in possibly some measure. And in that scheme of things, what is really important is that quality is most important. Compliant real estate is absolutely important. But what we've seen is the widening gap of a premium asset and a grade B asset, right? So what was just before COVID was a very narrow margin between the two kinds of asset. That gap, certainly will increase significantly as we go along, because people's expectation has changed. And that is also because a lot of developers and many people like us are going and trying to really create buildings of choices by either amenitizing it, by making sure either the wellness or the health considerations are up to the mark on the building, making sure how technology helps in delivering a better experience in the building. All of that will lead to definitely the better assets getting leased out first, right? And that is really the biggest part of the course corrections which we think has happened in the last 2 years.
Super. So I have more questions, but what I'll do is I quickly want to wrap from a perspective of focus areas, and I would say, Karan, if I may ask you, your in 2020, your biggest bet on two cities that you think in India will be your biggest focus.
22, you mean?
Yeah, 22. Sorry.
In 22, I think Bangalore continues to definitely be, growth area, and the demand obviously is massive in Bangalore. And for us, I think the other opportunity will definitely be Pune. We've not really expanded there heavily. We only have one building, so that's definitely going to be a growth area where we see good demand with a good price holding. So those would be the two cities.
And if I may ask you a corollary to that question, would you have multiple centers like just in time kind what Amit was saying, or you would still go with the strategy of having large centers in easy to access areas?
We will continue to have centers within the hottest micro markets that that the top 6 cities have. That being said, we have done, we are looking at smaller size centers in more locations from many perspectives. One is like the speed of which it fills up, access to, closer to people's homes and things like that. If you see, like center in Express Towers, is like 200 desks. It's a smaller center that we've never done a center like that, but it's a outlet within South Bombay that we wanted to do. So we will have a much wider spectrum of size and location.
Super. Amit, two of your city focus, which city according to you would be the your biggest focus in 2022?
So, Jaggi, I think Bangalore, clearly we went from 6,000 desks to 22,000 desks in Bangalore in less than a year. So clearly Bangalore is seeing a lot of action. I think Mumbai is the next big one. I think Mumbai is very interesting because it's now catering to both the corporate side of things and as well as the IT/ITS crowd with the Thane-Belapur corridor. So we see that seeing a lot of traction. And then the third is, Kolkata. I mean, I am extremely pleasantly surprised with Kolkata. I think everybody wrote off that city. We are just going gangbusters in that city right now.
And what do you think is driving that demand in Kolkata?
I think all other places, the war for talent has just become extreme. And I think it's driving some of that to Kolkata because the talent was always there. The policies were not very favorable. I think now the government is also supporting a lot of that. I think it's similar things which is happening in what I call emerging metros. I was in a tier 2 city and the person there got very offended when I called it tier 2. So we now call those emerging metros. So I think those are similar to war for talent is what's driving probably Kolkata and some of the tier 2 cities as well.
So tier 2 cities, I must ask you, you're betting big in 2022 with one or two clients who want to go and develop in.
It's just not one or two clients, Jaggi. The client list is long. It's just not one or two clients. Jaipur, Coimbatore, Indore. These are the cities which are going to rock in 22 and 23.
Your city of focus from a perspective of development.
I think wherever we can do meaningful work in the clearly in the 4 metros that we are, and we want to see if we can grow our footprint in the other markets where we are not present. But otherwise, predominantly, we want to focus on the core markets. At least for the next 2 to 3 years, that's where the attention is going to be.
So core markets. And which do you think are in the core markets are the hottest markets of the next 1 or 2 years?
So the way I see, because of this whole layer of COVID, it has just disrupted people's ability to look beyond a particular level or dimension. The way we see infrastructure playing a role in changing the dynamic of a city, we've seen that time and time again. I think I continue to remain extremely bullish on Bombay because the amount of infrastructure that's coming out of all of this is just going to change the city completely. And the minute that hits us and we start experiencing that infrastructure, it will just change the ballgame. So I am really bullish on Bombay. I continue to see potential in Pune and Hyderabad as two cities which will continue to see growth. And infrastructure is only going to help those two cities further grow. So I would bet a lot on what the infrastructure game plan is for those cities, for whichever city it might be, whether it's an emerging city or whether it's the established cities. That's really going to be the differentiator in the next 5 years.
Super. Kaiser, for you, two hottest cities.
Jaggi, before I sort of reflect on the city, most sectorally speaking, I'm quite big on obviously the fact that tech is on a massive upswing, followed by BFSI. Because as the whole sort of market is expanding, balance sheets are becoming bigger. We obviously think that the market, the banking space, the BFSI space is going to expand significantly. And with that two sectoral focus, clearly Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai will be one of the big spaces to sort of work where we see a great amount of opportunity.
Super. Thank you. I think we still have about 3-4 minutes, but I just want to ensure that we summarize whatever we had in a beautiful discussion, short and crisp, as normally. These long discussions go on forever, but it was good. I think Karan, you said from a COVID perspective, you said very, very correctly that the two biggest learnings was relationship management and cost control. You put a big focus on that. Amit, you mentioned about the paranoia of how COVID hit and how you got out of it, and how you made the corrective measures in managing your stakeholders' relationships. Vinod clearly saw a huge opportunity in the COVID, and I'm sure it speaks volumes that during the peak of COVID they actually listed themselves. So he's putting his money where his mouth is. Vinod, well done on that. And Kaiser, I think you talked about creating value from a developer's perspective. Flex, you said, and agility were the future. You worked very hard on that, and I think your future buildings will also talk about it. Future of workspace, I think Karan, you mentioned about customized solutions. We work on demand. You talked about how technology can play a big role in creating easy to reach fluid spaces, the culture, and why people need to come back to office. Amit, you also mentioned about customer behavior, which drove decision making from your perspective to make distributive options for work. JIT, I love that concept, because if a tomato ketchup bottle can be delivered to your home in 10 minutes, why can't you walk to a workspace in 10 minutes? So I think that's a great idea that you came up with, and I'm sure somebody's catching on this. Vinod, you did mention about becoming more creative and upgrading the assets. I think flight to quality work from all of that is pushing us, because with consolidation happening in the market, very few players being there. And you also mentioned a very nice thing for our occupiers. I think you mentioned about the sun and moon welcome that you are ready to give them. That kind of welcoming people back to work is going to be a big thing for people to come back to work. Kaiser, you also mentioned about reinventing office spaces, the widening of gap between grade A and grade B, and how you spoke about how things can change and things will change. And it basically resonates with Vinod's point of flight to quality. Karan, for the two hottest cities from your perspective in WeWork, you mentioned Bangalore and Pune. You also mentioned that the hottest micro markets in each of the cities where you would put your flagpole on. Amit, you mentioned Bangalore, Mumbai, and you also said distant lagger Kolkata and the tier 2 cities is a big future for many of the co-working players. Vinod, you did mention that the core markets continue to drive a lot of attraction to the big boy developers. Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad would be your company's focus. And from Kaiser, you did mention sectoral focuses, and you're betting big on the banking, financial, and technology center spaces, especially in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. I think that's what was a summary. I think I did a reasonable job of making notes. I couldn't read my own handwriting, but it was good to have some discipline, which I learned from my good friend Ramesh Nair. After every event, he used to make a summary of this. So Ramesh, if you're listening or not, but thanks to you for all the learning. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure, as usual. Four big players who make a big bet on commercial real estate. All I'll say is that the good times are here to stay. And listening to Rakesh Jhunjhunwala yesterday, हिंदी में बोलते मेरा खून और बढ़ गया. So it was very, very heartening to see how Rakesh Jhunjhunwala looks at real estate. And I think with the 50 million jobs he talked about with the IT industry, I think both residential and office is here to stay. And we're going to have the next 5 years of a fabulous run. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, ANAROCK.
Thank you, Jaggi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Marwa, for that excellent session. And